Now, the purpose of this video is to supplement what we're looking at in class about how aggregate supply policies can be used to boost economic growth. So it's important to recognise that aggregate supply policies are about improving our overall supply potential in the long term. So the idea of supply policies, if you look at this, is to boost our productive capacity, allow us to have increased access to resources so that we can meet any additional demand without causing inflationary problems. So the idea is to push out the quantity and quality of our resources. That allows us to produce more, which means if there's more demand in the economy, we're able to meet that demand with increases in supply. We have the available resources that if demand was to increase, we can meet that demand with additional supply, and that can allow us to grow at sustainable rates going forward. So supply side policies are generally around boosting either the productivity of businesses or reducing their average cost of production. The idea being to boost economic growth in the long term without inflationary pressures. And the good thing about supply policies is they allow us to keep our prices down, which then should help to boost investment and consumption spending because people will buy more of our products once we keep our prices down. So when you're looking at ways to boost aggregate supply, and again, we're looking at things that will shift the supply curve to the right. So when you're drawing those demand and supply diagrams, you're things that will shift the supply right. Things we're going to talk about in this video: trade liberalisation, taxation reforms, deregulating markets, which means privatising markets rather than them being run by the government, education and infrastructure, and changes to unemployment benefits. So, for example, one good way to increase participation is to make people work for their unemployment benefits so that unemployed people will actively be getting skills, which then they can use to improve our productive capacity going forward. First one I want to talk about is labour market reforms. So labour market reforms are about, this is one of the things you will not have heard of probably before, it's about removing government involvement in the setting of pay and conditions. So rather than people being paid by the government, which is often inflexible and often doesn't give you the same incentive to work hard and be productive, what the government has done is they've allowed firms to implement a more decentralised system where wages and conditions are set at an individual workplace level. So the idea is then that businesses can negotiate their pay and conditions around performance and productivity. So people get paid based on how productive they are, and therefore that allows them to work harder and hopefully makes us more competitive. When the government implements wages, there's often a lack of incentive to work hard because you're going to get a designated wage regardless of how hard you work. So by implementing wages and conditions on a firm-by-firm basis, we can more closely link wages to efficiency and performance, the idea being to help lower costs of production for firms going forward. Labour market reforms can also include things like removing penalty rates to make us more competitive. It can reducing the minimum wage in certain industries. It can involve removing unfair dismissal laws so that firms have easier ability to sack people if they're not working to their capacity or not working as hard as they should. They are all examples of labour market reforms. So the idea between work choices, which was a form of labour market reform, which was designed to again sort of take it that bit further, where employees and employers can negotiate pay and conditions on a individual level, so between employee and employer. And the idea between that is to increase productivity, make people work harder, which should help to lead to more exports going forward because we're more competitive. It should help to boost effort, and there'll be less rules and regulations preventing people from working as hard as they can. So labour market reform, getting rid of the government intervention in the workplace as an incentive for people to work harder because their pay is linked to how hard they work. Lowering tax rates. Okay, what we can do to try and encourage efficiency is we can change the makeup of taxes. So some taxes are more inefficient than others. So good examples, income and company tax are quite inefficient taxes. Because what happens with income taxes, not only do they discourage consumption because it reduces disposable incomes, but higher income taxes also reduce labour force participation. So when income taxes are higher, people are less likely to be involved in the workforce. And that's really bad because it can lead to less competition for jobs, it can lead to higher wage pressures, and it can also discourage workers from being productive because they're going to get taxed at a higher rate. So the idea of lowering income taxes and shifting them to other areas is the idea that people have that other taxes are less inefficient because they don't have those negative impacts for people not wanting to work as hard. So they don't have those negatives for reducing the financial incentive for working hard. So the government has lowered company tax rates from 30% to 27.5%, That should help to boost supply because it boosts investment spending. It encourages firms to invest because they get to keep a high percentage of future profits, which is really good for productivity. Lowering income taxes helps to boost participation and boost supply by encouraging worker efficiency. So if you look at this example here, in the 80s, income taxes were as high as 60%. Now they've dropped to 45% for the top tax bracket, and even these middle tax brackets are lower than what they were in the past. So there's more incentive for participation, which should help increase competition for jobs, keep wages down, and therefore be good for our economic growth going forward. Trade liberalisation, another key policy we've implemented in recent years, which is a key supply side policy. The idea is that we remove barriers to trade. So we remove things like tariffs between different companies and quotas so that we're competing with more firms. It should help, it therefore increases competition, which encourages us to be more productive because we have to compete with cheaper imports. Firms may need to restructure their operations to remain competitive against cheaper imports. They may also shift resources, or we might specialise in areas of comparative advantage. So specialisation can also be created by trade liberalisation, which again helps us to boost our productive capacity because we're producing in areas that we're good at, or we essentially have lower opportunity cost, which can then allow us to grow in the future because we can specialise in what we're good at and trade with other goods and services going forward. Infrastructure projects, they help to reduce capacity constraints, so they make us more productive because you get rid of things like traffic jams and bottlenecks in production, which can help to lower transportation costs for firms and therefore make us more competitive going forward as well.